Yeah.
Yeah, that's why your figure looked familiar, but it wasn't recent. I put in 2 lectures today. It's supposed to be today, but it won't be Friday. But we're going to talk a little bit about the basic EXP 101 responses to exercise and how these influence the heart. Because that's the whole core of exercise testing, is using the stress of exercise to see that the heart functions normally. It's okay? All right. So one little piece of electrophysiology more, and you'd be surprised how fast we're going to be able to apply what we know and watch it unfold. Do you guys remember that if you were to plot another electrical impulse on top of an action potential, for the most part, the membrane channels will completely ignore it. So we're busy, leave us alone. Right? Remember that there are relative refractory periods where if you hammer, here's this one is showing it too, one, you were still in a fairly close to the absolute refractory period, and so stimulation failed to create another depolarization. Here at 2, they put a shock on this, and enough of the membrane was repolarized, enough of the sodium and L-type calcium channels were closed, that a stimulation opened them again, and you got a second. Does that make sense? And so this relative refractory period, it's worth remembering, because a lot of arrhythmias depend on if a little piece of electricity hits you there. Oh, are you guys familiar with the condition called commotio cordis? That's Latin. The commotion of the chest, or commotion in the heart. Every once in a while, usually teenage boys, decide that striking each other in the chest as hard as they can is a good idea. Bam! Okay, your turn. Bam! Bam! It's one of the San Joaquin towns this recently happened. If the timing, because when you hit muscle, it actually depolarizes and creates a small amount of electricity. What happens is, just by pure accident, one of the boys lands a punch on the sternum right about here. The heart can actually be flipped into an arrhythmia. I can't remember, some Modesto, Manteca, somewhere like that. A young man was actually killed trading punches with a friend. So this relative refractory period, regardless of the source of the electricity, can make trouble. So the whole rest of the lecture plays on the idea that, so if normally the steepest funny current is in the sinoatrial node, that means the sinoatrial cells should be the first to be polarized, and so they should lead the conversation of the heart, right? And the AV node, very slow in conduction, so it will pause the contraction. Is that right? So the whole organization of heartbeats has to do with timing and spatial distribution of the electric charge. Yes?
So how would you fix that? Would you stop?
Commotio cordis?
Arrhythmia.
Oh, we'll talk about that. You have to understand the source of the problem, but usually what you do is you blow all of the electricity out of the water. This is what defibrillation is. Everyone says, you take a start a heart program to learn how to start a heart. It's not what defibrillation does. Defibrillation is like if an arrhythmia is a chattering cocktail party where everyone's talking in a loud room at a beer party, and someone goes, "Shut up!" and everyone turns at you. That's defibrillation. Now, if you're lucky enough to have an oxygenated enough heart after that cardiac arrest, who should be the first one to speak out? Everyone together with me, sinoatrial node. See, I'm leading again. I'm the sinoatrial. So that's what defibrillation does. And yeah, that's one of many ways to treat it. So just to review what we've talked about, the sinoatrial node goes first, comes to the AV node. There should be a pause here so that there can be electromechanical coupling of the atria to empty into the ventricles. That's about 20% of the stroke volume comes from the atrial kick. It's small enough that if your atria don't go, you won't notice it at rest. It's big enough that if you try to exercise, missing 20% of your stroke volume, you'll notice it. Then The septum lights up, the bundle branches deliver the electricity to the base of the papillary muscles. The septum is the first to contract. It generally goes down and to the right. And then once the septum is stabilized, the Purkinje system causes the two ventricular walls to come up towards their, in and up towards their respective exit tunnels. Just watch this for a while. This represents the P wave. These ought to be in sync, so I'm going to say P when this hits the top. I want you to notice that the actual atrial contraction is a little bit later. P. 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 So I'm saying it when it's electric. Do you notice that this is a little bit delayed? Huh. Well, that's why, see that pause there, where there's no electricity, it's baseline? That's why the electricity is delivered to the AV node to kind of sit around and wait. Purposely slow the impulse down, so that the atria can empty into the ventricle. Does that make sense? I'm going to try also to show you that there is a delay between electricity and the actual contraction of the ventricle. You watch the ventricle when it moves in. And what I'm going to say is, arc, arc, arc. Am I earlier than the actual movement of the wall? Generally speaking, the movement of the wall happens, so this reflects the surface of the cells. The actual mechanical contraction deep inside each cell is usually occurring through the ST segment and into the T wave. Did everyone sort of track that? And notice how exquisitely timed it is. Okay? So anything, it is such a tightly choreographed dance that any change of timing or change of where impulses are coming from will blow the thing apart. So for instance, here is a nice normal tracing, P, Q, R, S, T. The T wave's a little biphasic, but don't worry about that. Actually looks like they have almost a bundle branch. Yeah, they got a bundle branch block. P, Q, R, S, T, P, Q, R, S, T. The normal spacing is from there to there. That makes the heart rate, the native heart rate, it becomes 300, 150, 175. You'll learn how to do that next week. So, as we used to say on Sesame Street, which one of these is not like the other? Not like the other. You're right. So this is clearly, something's up here. This is what's called premature, because if 75 is that distance, this is like a baby that comes early. A beat that comes early is called premature. Premature. Do you see any evidence if PQRST, PQRST, this little hump is the T. Do you see any evidence of a preliminary P wave in this thing? No. Do you notice how this is definitely wide compared to this? And there's already a bundle branch block here. But remember, time goes in that direction, so wide means slow. So this beat is outside the normal conductance system. This is a premature contraction originating in the ventricle. Okay? So, I mean, okay. Is this, how do you say this? Imperfection abounds in biology, and most systems are robust enough to handle the occasional slip. So, is this strictly normal, perfect? No, this is some sort of mistake. By the time males, I know the male number because it's easier to remember, by the time males get to be age 40, 40% of them will have these. So they are so common as to be tricky. Frankly, I hope we see some in your class that will have. I have them. I'll make a few for you. So here's just, one other thing. Relative, if we think about, so this looks different than that long-shouldered single cell depolarization in a single myocyte looks like this. But this area here of relative depolarization falls at the descending limb of a T wave for a group here would be the relative refractory period for most of the cells. So can anyone else, can anyone think of another upset? So normally these are common, they often are further out. Why is this one particularly disturbing, landing as it does, just about halfway through the T wave? It could hit a population of cells who are repolarized enough to accept another depolarization far too early, and what you will then get is ventricular tachycardia. So notice, here came another one of these early beats, it landing right on the descending limb of the T wave, and it triggers a Y complex oscillating rate, oscillating arrhythmia with a rate of 300, 150, about 165 to 180. So this person at rest has no atrial contraction, and the heart is going wiggle, 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 wiggle. With that? Okay, so that's a problem. Who asked that question? This would be a great one to shock. Because what you have is, it's sort of like a, it's like in a Coliseum, people are doing the wave. And because they're just going round, round, and round, we need to get them to stop. Firing off a gun would be one way to do that. Everybody freeze, and then hopefully they sit down. So as the slide implies, sympathetic stimulation can create these heterogeneities. Ischemia or drugs, anything that influences the channels, ability to transmit ions at different rates, that will do it. And it says there at the end, cell damage. So this is a picture of a heart in which some of the cells have died. So let's see how we're looking at this. You're looking at the bottom. So if someone cut me coronally and then laid my, no other way, you cut me and you're looking down at the top. Why is the right? No, we're looking from the bottom. That's strange. This is the left ventricle. This is the right ventricle. You're looking from the foot upward in a coronal section. Pink is a H&E stain. So pink is living tissue, or at least at the time of death. This is the slide. And blue is typically collagen. So notice that in this critter, I think it's a mouse based on its morphology, a papillary muscle is dead. A large part of the subendocardium has died in the left ventricle. There's a transmural scar with maybe a little bit of living tissue moving through there. Boy, is that a setup for an arrhythmia. So when you survive a heart attack, it will leave a scar, and that scar tissue can become a nidus, a seed, around which abnormal electrical activity can occur. And I'll show you how that happens, hopefully by the end of this one. Oh, this lecture's almost over. You can think of arrhythmias in a real broad way. This is really way too broad to be clinically useful. As too fast, too slow, or originating from a different pacemaker. Right? And when we say arrhythmia, it doesn't necessarily, for instance, if your sinoatrial node is sick and dies, boy howdy, it's not bad to have an AV nodal rhythm. So don't let arrhythmia cause you to think it's unusual or not average. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's not compatible with life. Someone whose SA node has died, the only thing keeping them alive is their AV nodal escape. But for the most part, tachyarrhythmias, we'll probably get to circus rhythm next time because it's a hard concept. But a lot of tachyarrhythmias simply come from increasing the speed of pacemakers or bathing them in epinephrine. Bradyarrhythmias, slow rates, usually originate, you could have excessive vagal tone, as you guys did in your, apparently, your MPP 101 lab that stimulated the vagus and slowed down hearts. That's not that common. That's a common reason for people to have bradycardia in a dental chair if someone is stimulating their mouth or airway hard. But usually in life, bradycardias result because the sinoatrial maker has dropped out or there's a block in conduction. So the sinus node is still going at 75 beats per minute, but the AV node is only propagating 1 out of 4 beats. I think that'll slow you down like 20. I'll do my math. For ventriculars. So, in the broad sense, bradycardias are defined as heart rates lower than 60. Again, try not to pathologize these. You got to know what's up first before you make pathology. Anyone here have a resting heart rate below 60? I do intermittently. It is a bradycardia. Whether or not it's normal, that's later on. When you do electrocardiography, you simply follow the rules. So it's lower than 60, bradycardia. Right? Then you decide later on, oh, it's athletic. Due to high vagal tone, no problem. Or you decide, oh, your SA node is sick. Those are very different, by the way. People with bradycardias are 22, it's almost always that. People with bradycardias who are 78, it's almost always that. Right, so disease is common in the elderly. And then down here is this impulse conduction. If the AV node or the bundle branches are sick, this will cause atrial rate to continue normally, but they don't make it through into the ventricle. We'll study all of these in great detail. Tachyarrhythmias, by definition, is a heart rate greater than 100. Once again, I apologize. So during X, anyone here ever had a heart rate above 100 at the ARC? Right? Either you're working out or someone attractive or the sex you prefer goes by. Either of those things can do it. And almost always that's from sympathetic stimulation of the sinus node or withdrawal of sympathetic tone. We saw the VTAC I just showed you was where you had a triggered activity where an impulse hit right in the relative refractory period and triggered a rapid beat. So that could happen, triggered activity. And then this thing of altered conduction. Remember, normally the impulses come down the Purkinje cells and then they sit and wait quietly, the cells wait quietly for the next impulse. That can be different, and let me see if I can find one. So here would be, this is the example of that VTAC we saw, where you get an early stimulation in the relative refractory period and it stimulates an oscillating partial depolarization, just going in circles. Here's a VTAC. Here's a, this might be a good, we'll see how the timing goes. So, let's just look at that for a moment. The ventricle, I wish I had a timer, because if we time this, we'd probably find that the atrial rate is not any faster than 100, even with killing the sympathetic of, not being normal. This is still probably less than 100, but you realize, just look how quickly that's contracting. I bet you it's up towards 180. Does anyone have a sense of tornadic activity? That there's a tornado going on in the ventricle? Just look at the colors. Do you see, where's the focus? And that's the eye of the storm. Makes you wonder if there might not be a piece of scar tissue here and the electrical impulse is chasing its own tail around and around and around. By the way, this is so fast that the amount of filling is quite small. And so even though the heart rate at rest here might be 180, the actual cardiac output is dismal. The blood pressure has probably fallen and therefore the patient has fallen. Sir?
What causes the high rate for the relativity?
It has to do with how quickly the arrhythmia gets around the corner and then starts the whole process over. Sort of one way to answer that is, if the next normal beat was going to be over here, Ignacio, well, that came early, right? So right away, at least that one extra beat would be early. If the, I'm going the wrong way, hang on. If you get one of these reentrant rhythms, you get an oscillation, and it's just going to be faster because it's happening over and over in the same location. Let me go to, so circus rhythm. It's a hard enough thing. Let me flip it up today. I'll do a little set as we do a volleyball, and then we'll smash it down on Friday. So, a circus rhythm is when there is a block to conduction that is usually temporary, and so in generally speaking, the heart should always be in the same state. So up here is normal. You have, let's say, a bundle branch, and it breaks into two pieces, two Purkinjes, and they're lighting up ventricle, and then the impulse of activation starts to head back, and they butt noses at exactly the same time. Everything is all depolarized in basically the same time. This, oh look, here's the secret of circus reentry is you have a partial conduction block. So for whatever reason, let's say this island here is a piece of scar tissue, and there's intermittent scar tissue through this tract. So now this tract is slowed down. So as the original impulse comes, telling this to go off, it can't go down this, because this isn't ready yet. And so I'm still recovering. So the impulse comes this way, comes to this cell, which depolarizes normally, comes this way, and by the time, this extra time to go here to here, this is now recovered. It's now fully repolarized. And so it will accept electricity. Guess what's happened here by the time this moves up to here? This is recovered. Guess what happens by the time this is recovered? The upper impulses that ought to be controlling the heart are cut out of the loop, and this thing just chases its own tail. Does that make sense? And you can see why it's called circus rhythm. It's just the impulse starts going around. Scar tissue is an absolutely great place. It creates the island that separates the impulse, and it creates an area that's partially slow, either because the living cells are sick or because the connective tissue that's woven around them slows the impulse. That's a lot to know. Let me see if we can look at something and we'll go. Oh, we have 1 minute to look at something pretty. We'll start here next time. So again, you're looking at a cross section of the left ventricle. This is the blood hole. This is an experimental measurement where you actually induce VTAC. And don't you have the impression of tornadic activity here? It's just going around in a circle. This is a simulation where you do a computer model based on the idea of circus movement. That, somehow, probably, I don't know where, I have to look at this very carefully to figure out where the scar is. Looks like it might be right here. Watch, the red is fully depolarized. See that island there? That may be part of the problem. But anyway, our computer models of how VTAC works and the actuality of it. This is a cool one because if you look at this, there's several foci, there's several tornadoes here. There's a tornado there. Looks like there's a tornado here. There might be one up there. Okay, that's enough for now, don't you think? All right, we'll talk more about this on Friday. Good job, guys. Those of you, I'm supposed to ask Amy, how many of you are going to discussion today? Just raise your hands real quick. How many? Well, that's just about perfect. And how many are thinking of going on Friday? Perfect. And how many of you Sahi is serving as discussion orphans? Yay for Sahi. Thank you. And you talk to them? Go back and talk to Sahi right now, just to be sure she knows you're coming. All right, we'll see you guys over there. Good on you.